Welcome everyone, my name is Rigel and today I'm going to talk about my personal top 16 of Junior Eurovision 2023. Now, I'm recording this on the 3rd of November, and if you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen that I did like an entire Twitter thread just kind of reacting to the songs, and obviously because of copyright reasons, I'm not really gonna do that on YouTube. But I do have all the songs kind of in my head now. I have listened to all of the songs, and I've listened to them several times more through the power of recaps and such. So I think I have a basic idea of what my top 16 will look like. Now, it is going to change probably depending on how I feel on the particular day, and perhaps how the staging is going to look. But I'm not really going to post another video about it because I have other stuff to do. So yeah, this is my top 16. I have to remind you, just in case, this is my personal top 16. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. And none of what I'm saying is kind of towards the singers themselves, as it were. This is just about the songs and perhaps the music videos, if it comes to it. So yeah, with that said, let's get into some general comments that I want to make about this edition of Junior Eurovision. So the first thing is, I don't think this is a particularly strong year. There's a lot of ballads and a lot of girls, as you can see in these like bullet points here, and I hate to say it, but a lot of them feel kind of same. They do have like the native language in them, which is great because there is that whole native language rule, but other than that, I don't think this is a particularly strong edition. I didn't really follow Junior before, well, 2021 obviously, but I went back and looked at 2020, and that was fine. But I would say, in general, 2021 and 2022 were both stronger than 2023, in my personal opinion. Again, you may disagree. That's totally fine. So yeah, I don't think this is a particularly strong year. And like I mentioned earlier, this year there's a lot of girls. In fact, this might be the first ever edition to not have a single solo male act. There's Sepp and Jasmijn from the Netherlands, and also there's the two boys from Renina for Georgia, and that's kind of it. And again, there's no solo male act, so each act is at least part female. So yeah, I don't know how to feel about that. I think some people who are into like Yas Girls Slay Bobs might be into it, but I don't know. I think that's not very ideal, I would say, in terms of like gender equality. And I think that also says something about our society at large, that boys in general are less willing than girls to get into the arts, to get into singing and such, unless they get to a certain age and they decide that they have enough power or money or whatever to do this stuff. So yeah, that's unfortunate, and I do think it would be better for the contest and for society as a whole if more boys were willing to get into the arts, like I said, singing, dancing and such. So yeah, that's kind of unfortunate, and I do hope that, like I mentioned, I do hope that in future editions we will see more boys take part in Junior Eurovision, for example. And finally, in terms of overall comments, because of all this sameness around this particular edition, so many ballads, so many girls, I think the key absolutely is to stand out. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of diversity, and I think in particular it's important to make use of that diversity to stand out from the crowd and for the audience to notice and to remember what's happening going forward. And at the end, I'll be kind of discussing who I think can realistically win Junior Eurovision this year. And there I will bring back the whole topic of, standing out. So yeah, in short, standing out is key. So with that said, let's get into our top 16 ranking. Now, as with many other rankings, I'm going to work from the bottom to the top, which means I'm going to start with my personal last place and move upwards until we get to my personal winner. So with that said, let's get to our first song, aka my last song, and that is Albania. Albania is being represented by Viola Giseli with the song Bota Ime. Now, my thoughts on the song is that I think it's great that younger singers are getting involved with their songwriting. I think that's great. I think it's great to foster this idea of songwriting at a young age to better aid your adventures when you get to adulthood and such. I think that's great, and as I understand it, this is what has been required this year in the national final Junior Fest, which was Albania's national final, and I think that's great. However, without trying to sound too mean, I think too much of this has been of Viola's own working. Again, I don't mean to, put her down or anything, but clearly at a younger age, you haven't had as much exposure to how songwriting is supposed to be like, and so it doesn't sound very coherent. There's a structure, absolutely. There's a whole verse chorus thing. But especially in the instruments, I think the drums and such really are a little bit of a mismatch with kind of the melody and the tempo. And so this all just makes it a little bit off-putting. And also, some people might also point to the tempo. The song is a little bit slow, and for that, I think it makes it a little bit less interesting. So this is, again, not an indictment on Viola Giseli personally, but the song can get a little bit uninteresting, and if their point is to foster young songwriters, then that's great. I think they should keep heading in that direction. However, if we're talking about competitiveness at Junior Eurovision, this frankly isn't it. So with that said, let's move on to my second to last place, aka my 15th place, which is Malta. This year, Malta is being represented by Yulen with the song Stronger. Now, on its surface, it doesn't seem like something that I would place second to last, right? It's a correct ballad, and Yulen sings very well. She has a great voice. But that's kind of precisely the issue to me. It's only correct. It's not good, it's not amazing, but it's also not terrible. And it lacks the features that would make one go, oh, I remember this is the entry from Malta. And there's just nothing like that unless you count the key change between the verse and the chorus, which I cannot fathom why you would do that, especially in the ballad. Okay, maybe in pop songs and such, I think there is an argument for doing that, but this is just a standard old ballad, and I think if you're using a key change and only a key change to try to make your song interesting, I think you will have spectacularly failed. A good song can sound good without needing a key change, and when they do use a key change, it makes it better. But in this case, I think key changes are just there to hide the blatant nothingness of this entry, and like I mentioned earlier, there's nothing in the song that could make you go, oh, that's Malta's entry, because it doesn't really sound Maltese in any discernible way. It doesn't use Maltese language. It's just generic English, and I think you can tell that it's a song that was written by Swedish songwriters. But in any case, it's just correct. I think that is the best way to describe this entry. It's correct and nothing else. And for that reason, it doesn't stand out and I can't really rate it any higher than this. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to my 14th place, which is Poland. Poland will be represented by Maya Krzyzewska with the song I Just Need a Friend. And to me, in my initial comments, I said that this was a contrived, outdated ballad. And I kind of still stand by that. And it's nothing new. It's not really bringing anything new to the table. And it tries so hard to sound like it's an English song, but because of the native language rule, they have to put some Polish in there, which I think is good actually, because if you look at Maya's performance at Szansa na Sukces, you'll realize that her English enunciation isn't great. And I think for that, I would really appreciate the existence of the native language rule in Junior Eurovision, because kids don't always have access to excellent English education, and so they sometimes don't pronounce things or even speak things the best. So yeah, in this case, I think her enunciation was not great. The live performance was also a bit off as well in terms of the vocals, and again, the production is all right, but I think it's contrived and outdated, and like with Malta, there's nothing particularly distinctive about this. I think they're gonna try to put as much staging as possible into this again. Like last year, they tried to do the whole visual effects thing, and this year they decided to ban visual effects. So yeah, they'll try to really stage this really hard, but I don't think there's anything particularly distinctive about the song. And so unlike 2021, for example, I would not really count this as a possible winner, and it certainly is far from a winner in my own eyes. With that said, let's move on to my personal 13th place, which also happens to be Poland's neighbor, and that is of course Ukraine. Ukraine is being represented by Anastasia Demid with the song Kwitka, which in Ukrainian translates to flower. Now, I think a lot of people were really excited about this even at the national final, because compared to a lot of the other songs in the national final, which were like mostly ballads, this was a kind of upbeat little fun little bop. And I can agree with them on that. At the national final, it certainly stood out, even though I must confess I have not listened to a single other song of the national final. But still, I think it's a little bit overhyped. I think Ukrainians love it, but beyond that, I don't think a lot of people are calling it like the best song ever created or anything like that. And for me, it's even a little bit annoying, because she's repeating the word Kwitka so many times. It's kind of the only thing you remember about the song. You hear Kwitka, you think the Ukrainian entry of Junior Eurovision 2023. And for me, especially not just the repetition of the word, but also the melody and also the production and the beat behind the song, I think it's a little weird. It sounds wrong. I can't really describe why. It just sounds weird, and like I mentioned in the What We Know So Far video, it repeatedly reminds me of that Moscow song, which was German, mind you. It was not actually a Russian song, but the song was Moscow, something like that. And yes, I know that's kind of ironic, but I must remind you, it's a German song. It's not Russian. Yeah, it really just keeps reminding me of that song. And in this case, that's not necessarily a good thing. I think this just kind of points out how repetitive it is, especially in the chorus. And yeah, I'm just really not into it. Although I think the Ukrainians will very valiantly stage the song as they should. So yeah, I'm not super into it. But with that said, let's move on to my 12th place, which is Georgia. Georgia this year will be represented by Anastasia and Renina, the former being Anastasia Vasade, who had won the national selection Ranina this year, 2023, while Ranina, that is the second part of the representatives, are two boys who had been finalists of Ranina 2022. Now, why they did this is not known, but traditionally, just the winner of that year's edition of Ranina goes to Junior Eurovision. But this year, for some reason, they decided to add the two boys, I guess, to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit less girl heavy. I don't really know. But yeah, in any case, they will be singing the song Over the Sky, which is a song about being your own hero, as evidenced in the line in the chorus, "You're the hero you've been always looking for." Now, I've always thought that idea was a little strange. Sometimes that's true, but I don't know, especially since most of the song is in Georgian, I don't know how this is going to motivate people to empower themselves, essentially. And even in the chorus, the line before, "You're the hero you've been always looking for," that's in Georgian as well, so I don't know how they expect people to sing along, per se. I will say the technique which they used in the chorus, where right kind of nearly after Anastasia finished singing her line, one of the boys starts singing in Georgian in a very unique tone. I believe that is a thing that's unique to Georgian music, and I applaud them for that. Of course, it's always great to include traditional elements in your Eurovision entries and such. However, beyond that, I can't say the song really interests me much, and I can definitely identify that this is Georgia because of its uniqueness with the elements, the vocal elements in there. But beyond that, the song doesn't particularly interest me, and I would say that of the 3 years that I've been following Junior, this is probably the weakest Georgian entry. Personally, you might disagree, and that's totally fine. So with that said, let's move on to Italy, who are my 11th place. Representing Italy this year will be the duo Melissa and Rania with the song Un Mundo Giusto, which in Italian translates to A Just World. Now, Melissa and Rania were selected through the show The Voice Kids Italy, which had its first edition this year in Italy in 2023, and Melissa was the winner, while Rania, who is, by the way, Moroccan, not Italian, actually also ended up in the final. And some people thought initially that they would select only Melissa, but it turns out they were going to select both Melissa and Rania, and they'll be singing a song, like I mentioned earlier, being Un Mundo Giusto. Now, this has actually been ranked even lower than I have ranked it, which is 11th place. I think on the scoreboard app is actually like 14th or 15th, which I think is kind of harsh. And I think part of the reason for that is because the song is like really slow and some might say outdated, but I actually kind of like that. From here forward, I think all of the songs I can say I enjoy. I might not love them, but I start to enjoy these songs. And so here, this is kind of on the border, but I do enjoy this because when I was growing up, my mom used to listen to a lot of old ballads from like the 80s or even the 70s, and this kind of reminds me of that, but kind of in a good way. And so for me, it doesn't really have that kind of negative connotation of being boring and such, and the message is positive. That said, however, I can see why it would get a little bit boring, and the language sounds pretty. However, that aside, there's also not too much that's particularly distinctive about this. So unfortunately, I cannot have it in my top 10, which will be started with the next country, which is Portugal. Portugal will be represented by Julia Machado with the song Where I Belong. Now, this came about as Julia Machado won the show The Voice Kids Portugal, and the song was co-written by, among others, her coach, at The Voice Kids Portugal. And the song is basically about anti bullying. And even though Julia herself did not take part in the songwriting, it's actually very personal to her because, in case you didn't know, she actually doesn't live in Portugal. Julia actually lives in the United States. And partially because of that, she's getting a lot of bullying from her classmates at school. So part of that is why she's singing this song. And of course, in general, it doesn't just apply to her alone, but it's a song about anti-bullying, which I think is really nice. However, the one gripe I have with the song, and this is a very, very personal gripe, is that the song is in a major key. To me, it feels like something this personal and this emotional. It feels like it makes more sense for it to be in a minor key, and in general, I just prefer music in the minor keys, let's be honest. Maybe that's a product of the modern pop industry. I don't really know, but I kind of just mentally grimace every time I hear a ballad in a major key, and I think that's part of why I can't enjoy the song as much as I wished I would. And I'm not one of those people calling for Porto 2024 or whatever, but yeah, it's still a pretty good song. It's not my least favorite of the Portuguese entries in recent years. And I think this will still do pretty well in the juries, although it's harder to say with the televote. So I do enjoy this, however, because it's in a major key, I can't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. So if that's said, let's move on to my 9th place in this ranking, which also happens to be Portugal's neighbor, and that is, of course, Spain. Spain will be represented by Sandra Valero with the song Love You, spelled Loviu. Now, this came about as RTVE opened a public audition process, and the winner of that audition was, as you might expect, Sandra Valero, who sang a cover of a song from, I believe, the Spanish version of The Little Mermaid. There was this great ballad on there, and she sang it very well and showed off her voice very well. And after that, RTVE opened the process for songwriters to send in their songs, and Sandra Valero herself said that she would like to sing some sort of ballad with rhythm, whatever that means. But in the end, that was not what happened. Instead, what we got here with Love You is a song that's mostly in Spanish, but the chorus also features other languages like English, Portuguese, and I think French as well. But it's a little bit more bluesy, a little bit more jazzy, definitely more upbeat. And it's a pretty far cry from a ballad. Nonetheless, it is still a bop, and I think that in a way, kind of retrospectively, RTVE actually made a pretty good call by not selecting a ballad, because, I mean, look at all of the other ballads that we already have. And so this will undoubtedly stand out among all of the female ballads. Now, there will be 4 dancers accompanying Sandra Valero in the performance, and I think there will be a little hint of inspiration from certainly the music video, but also from the performance from Lissandro last year, because in terms of genre, this isn't actually all that far off, because even though that was in a minor key and Love You is in mostly a major key, it is still kind of bluesy, kind of jazzy, and I think there could be, like, for example, the microphones, for example, there could be some inspiration to be taken there. And, in general, I like it, but I don't know, it's like lacking something for me that makes it like that much more exciting, for example. I'm sure RTVE will stage the hell out of this. They might bring that train on stage, who knows, but it's a pretty solid entry from Spain, and I would say this might be the first entry on my top 16 that I think could win the contest. But without talking about winners for now, let's move on to my 8th place, which is Estonia. The first ever Estonian representative at Junior Eurovision will be Arhana, full name Arhana Sandra Artma. Now, she wasn't really selected through any sort of particular national final. However, she did win a song contest or a singing contest called Tähtede Lava back in 2022. And, some might consider that to be the national final, but we don't know that for sure yet. Regardless, this year she will be singing the song Hoiame Koku, which in Estonian means stick together. This song, I believe, was meant to be fully in Estonian. However, and I think we can all agree that it was crowbarred in. The last chorus is for some reason in English. I don't know why they did that. Maybe to sound a little bit more international, as it were. And that's kind of my main issue with this. Otherwise, the song is pretty good. It doesn't go as far as I hope it would. It's a pretty good ballad. The progression is alright, and Arhana's vocals are actually pretty good as well. She performed the song live a while back, and yeah, that's all great. However, I think there's no reason to crowbar in an English section if one, you can't really speak English, and two, the original song was written with Estonian in mind. So I think it's a little bit forced at best, and so that kind of turns me off from the thing. And otherwise, I think this is a very valiant effort for a country debuting in Junior Eurovision, and things will only get better from here. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good entry. It's not going to win or anything, but I think this can come maybe top 5 or top 10 in the jury, but we'll have to see. For the time being, let's move on to my 7th place, which is France. This year, France will be represented by Zoe Clausure with the song Gur. I know how it's pronounced in French. You don't need to remind me. I took several years of French, and, I'm trying to speak English here, so yeah. The song title translates to heart in French. Now, the selection was kind of private. There weren't really any, rumors about it until, literally 1 or 2 days before the actual announcement. It had been known several years before then that Zoe was interested in doing Junior. However, no one really made the connection until, like I mentioned, a few days before the actual announcement. So yeah, at the announcement, the song was also premiered, although the music video came later, which was very interesting because for some reason they had Zoe sit in front of a piano, even though there was no discernible or at least prominent piano part in the song. So yeah, that's kind of interesting, and I would say that of my top list so far, this is kind of the second song that might have a chance at winning. As we know, France really likes to stage the hell out of their entries, and being a pop song, this definitely stands out from the pack, and there's lyrics in there that make me feel like they're trying to appeal to an international audience, like the I parts, and also c'est comme ci comme ça, which is no phrase that any sane Frenchman would ever say. So yeah, I think they're trying to go international, even though the whole song is still in French. And for that, and also for the fact that, again, it's as a pop song, and for the probably very good staging that France is going to do, I think they are trying to go for the double, but we'll have to see what happens because there definitely are other contenders in there. So with that said, let's move on to the country that hosted the previous edition, and that is, of course, Armenia, which is my 6th place. Armenia are being represented by young girls with the song Do It My Way. There was speculation earlier that the representative was going to be Sati Sargsyan, who did a very good cover of Tattoo by Lorraine. However, that turned out not to be true, and according to some rumors that I've read, Sati Sargsyan might actually be representing Armenia in the Our Generation thing, which was basically Russia's kind of answer to Junior Eurovision after they had been kicked out. So, make of that information what you will. But anyways, back to Junior now. We will have Yan Girls representing Armenia, and the name of this group is basically a play on the fact that most Armenians have the family name suffix Yan, like I mentioned, Sargsyan, and also other Yans, for example, and also play on the phrase young girls. So it's kind of genius, and the song is very K-poppy. I was kind of skeptical, sure, I didn't really hear the song, and the music video already looked kind of K-poppy, but yeah, it is very K-poppy. Some people jokingly refer to it as A-pop, Armenia pop. It's very K-poppy, and, in a way, I'm glad that Tokyo 9 is branching out. However, it might be precisely because of it being K-poppy that I'm not super into it. Don't get me wrong, I like the production value, I like the catchiness, rapid fire camera shots, for example. I like all of that, but for me, I just am not into K-pop in general, so this kind of turns me off from that. I think their entry last year, Dance, had the perfect kind of balance between K-pop and regular pop, and so this goes a little too far into the K-pop territory and also a little bit too trappy for my tastes. So yeah, I'm not totally into it, but this is quality pop nonetheless. And I think this will definitely captivate televoters, if not jury members, at Junior Eurovision in Nice. So I would say this is also another possible winner, but I would personally suggest this would be a little bit of an outsider. So with that said, let's move on to my top 5 now, starting with the country of Ireland. Ireland will be represented by Jessica McKean with the song, I've been told this is pronounced Aisling. So it's not pronounced Aisling or Isling or whatever, it's pronounced Aisling because that's Irish apparently, which is also the language that is used in the song. Now, Jessica McKean was the winner of the national final Junior Eurovision era, and there were other favorites in the final. I can't remember her exact name, but this year Junior Eurovision era was very, very girl heavy as well. There was literally like one boy throughout the entire contest, and he did not make it to the final. So yeah, there were 3 girls in the final. But getting back to Jessica McKean, she eventually came out victorious as the winner of the national final, after which there was a song that was basically assigned to her, as happens with previous entries as well. What's interesting this year, and with some other years as well, is that the previous participants also took part in the songwriting. Particularly this year, the highlight is Sophie Lennon, who represented Ireland last year and in fact also appeared in the music video doing a high note, and it was confirmed later that Sophie Lennon will actually also be on stage with Jessica in Nice and provide backing vocals basically, so that will be very nice to see. As to the song itself, it's also very like quintessential Ireland sounding, which I think on balance is a good thing. However, I don't think you want to portray this too often. There's the elements of expectancy, sure. However, in general, I think if you go too far down that route, then people would not know you for anything else. So I don't think it's always a good idea to have it, but in this case, I think it's fine. And Jessica McKean has an excellent voice, although the enunciation I think needs some work. I can't always hear the exact words and syllables that she's enunciating, for example. However, the song sounds very serene. I think that is the word to describe the song as a whole. And I think the structure is okay, although the drums in the last chorus is a little bit weird. So yeah, overall I think I really enjoy this. It sounds very Irish, and having Sophie Lennon, you can't really go wrong. So yeah, I would say this is a pretty solid Irish entry. I don't think it is anywhere near as good as Solace. I think Solace is amazing, but this is still a very solid entry from Ireland. And let's hope that this year Ireland can at least be in the top 10. I don't think they'll win, but we'll see what happens. With that said, let's move on to perhaps a very interesting choice for a country to be in my top 5, and that is Germany, which is my 4th place. Germany this year will be represented by Fia with the song Ohne Worte, which in German translates to without words. Now, this is a very interesting entry because this is the first time, perhaps in the history of Junior Eurovision, that we have an entry that is performed partially in sign language. Although I must say I'm slightly confused by the fact that she performed American Sign Language instead of, I don't know, German Sign Language or European Sign Language, if that's the thing. But nonetheless, it is a song that's mostly sung in German. There are phrases of English, I believe, in there. However, mostly the song is in German, and sign language also features very prominently in the initial performance of the song, and also in the music video. Now, Fia was selected through an online vote. Basically, there was this online voting process where 5 entries were put up along with 1 minute long videos of the entries being sung, and Fia came out on top because, let me be honest, the other entries I thought was super bland, and this at least stood out for the fact that it had sign language. And the song is basically, I can't say what it's about because I have not actually seen the lyrics in being translated and such, and I don't speak German, obviously. So yeah, I don't know for sure what the song's about, but I would say it's about communications, basically. Communicating with people regardless of whether they have disabilities and such. And yeah, I think that's very great, and it's a great message to send to Junior, for example. And again, I really like the inclusion of sign language in Junior Eurovision, no less. And so yeah, I think it's a really interesting entry. It's I would say definitely Germany's best entry to date. The background drum loop is a little bit repetitive. However, I have seen that Fia is actually rehearsing some sort of dance break. Which is going to be interesting, and she's also going to be accompanied by a dancer, so that will definitely make the song a little bit more interesting. But for the fact alone that they are including sign language in a Junior Eurovision song, I think that should be applauded by itself. So yeah, I really enjoy this, and I think this is definitely Germany's best entry, and maybe as a slight outsider, this might have a chance to even win the contest. I really don't think so, honestly, but I would not rule it out at this point, and certainly I really do hope this at least ends up top 10, if not top 5. So with that said, let's move on from one Big 5 country to another Big 5 country, and actually the last one now, if you've been keeping track, and that is the UK, which enters my top 3. The UK this year will be represented by Stan Unique, or if you want to be really pedantic, Stan Unique 3, who are a girl group composed of 3 girls named Yasmin, Hyla, and Macy. Now, they were selected through an internal process, and usually, even though this only results in one person being selected, the jury at the selection decided that they could group these 3 together, even though they don't know each other, and form a song to sing for them instead of having, one solo act, for example. Their song is called Back to Life, and it was written by a number of songwriters who I believe were also responsible for the entry last year. Now, during an interview with the Eurotrip podcast, the head of delegation of the UK at Junior described the group as a mini Spice Girls. So I would kind of agree with that, but I would say it's a little bit more like Little Mix. I must confess that I don't know what Little Mix's music sounds like, but if you played me this and you told me that this was a song from Little Mix, and I would be like, okay, yeah, makes sense. But yeah, that aside, this is a very catchy pop song. I think some people have have a problem with the whistle part, which as far as I can tell, isn't actually a whistle. It's more like a recorder because, you know, I'm a whistler myself. And I think the part in the song doesn't really sound like that. I think it sounds a little bit more kind of like a recorder instrument, but not necessarily a recorder, if you know what that means. So yeah, I think it's fine actually. If anything, it's more distinctive. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's important for songs to stand out if they're going to want to win Junior Eurovision, and this definitely stands out. You know, every drop there's a very prominent whistle slash recorder, whatever you want to call it, and people will remember that, and you know, they'll hear this whistling part and be reminded that, oh, this is the entry from the UK. And so I think that's a really good thing, and you know, it gets people talking. Certainly, you know, whether you like it or not, you're going to be talking about it. So I think that's a really smart strategy on behalf of the songwriters. And yeah, with that said, the rest of the song is also really catchy, really cool. And one thing I think is that is kind of underappreciated about the song is the lower register of the girls, because a lot of the big ballads this year, they involve, you know, the girls singing higher notes, for example. And even in the Dutch entry, which we're going to get to later, even in the Dutch entry, Jasmine sings a really high note, and this just blows that contrast out of the water. And you know, the girls are mostly singing in a lower register, which definitely makes it stand out from the pack even more. So for those reasons, I really enjoy this track, and you know, I think this has a very realistic chance of winning. I don't know about most realistic. I don't think this is necessarily the winner, but I think this has a very, very good shot, especially considering that the BBC are no longer afraid of putting money into their staging, and I think they probably will ship the free whatever podiums they're called, maybe from the UK to Nice. So we'll have to look out for that, and I think the UK definitely has a good chance at winning the contest this year. With that said, let's move on to my second place, which is the other entry that I just mentioned, and that is of course the Netherlands. The Netherlands this year will be represented by Sepp and Jasmine with the song Holding On To You. This was selected at the National Final Junior Song Festival, which is the long-running national final of the Netherlands. In fact, this year after it ended, they already opened submissions for Junior Song Festival 2024. So basically how it works is they have a bunch of auditions, and then some of them get selected, and eventually they get grouped into a few types. There's solo acts, there's duos, there's girl groups, there's boy bands and such. And this year the duo was Sepp and Jasmine, who were singing the song Holding On To You, and won the entire national final resoundingly. In fact, they got 12 points from all three voting groups. So that was a very clear victory for Sepp and Jasmine, who are singing this EDM song. And you know, this is kind of new for the Netherlands, I think. I haven't followed them, you know, before 2020, obviously, but you know, I don't often associate the Netherlands as a country that would send an EDM song to a Eurovision event. So yeah, that's kind of fresh, although some people have criticized the song for being a bit outdated, a bit old. And you know, I can see the argument. You know, it sounds like something that would come out of maybe 2014 or 2015, but it's still a bop nonetheless. And I think especially the choreography is done very well, especially a thing where they move around and look at each other, and right before the drop. That's kind of cool, and I think they did really well on that. And I think this year this is another of one of the songs that I think can win. Sometimes Netherlands nails their staging and sometimes they don't. But this year, if they do, I think this will greatly attract the attention of the televote. And also, Yasmine has already proven in the national final performance that she is a very, very competent vocalist, and that is sure to get some votes from the jury as well. So I think this has a very good chance of winning as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if we were heading to Rotterdam next year. So yeah, this is a really fun bop, and every time I hear it, I just kind of break into my own dance, and yeah, it's excellent. So with that said, let's move from an upbeat song to a not so upbeat song, and also my winner of the entire edition, that is North Macedonia. I know, I'm surprised as well. A few days ago, I was looking at the scoreboard app and I was wondering, wait, why is North Macedonia, of all countries, leading the scoreboard right now? And I think it's still leading right now, and I can understand why after having listened to the song multiple times. But before we get to the song, let's get to the singer, who is Tamara Gruyeska, who will be representing North Macedonia in Nice. And she is basically a very talented singer who has already won several contests and taken part in many more. And she already has a relatively large internet presence, and I think that's part of what helped her to get selected, because in North Macedonia they're using some sort of internal auditioning system, and Tamara Gruyeska came out on top. Now there's a little bit of debate of over whether it's Gruyeska or Gruyevska, and I used to think he was the latter because her dad is Gruyevsky with a V in the middle, but she titles her YouTube channel as Gruyeska, so clearly for some reason she wanted to remove the V in there, and it's up to her to do that. So with that said, let's get to the song, which is titled Gajimi Gajimi Koi, which in Macedonian means tell me who, as opposed to tell me why, which I thought it was a few days ago. But yeah, the song basically talks about instead of being your own hero or being there for your friends as heroes, it's basically asking, like, why don't we have heroes? And it's a little bit philosophical, and one could argue that the song in general is a little bit too mature for Junior, but I don't care. I love it. In the past few years, since Serbia went a bit more avant-garde and other Balkan countries pulled out of the contest, we've really been lacking a good, proper Balkan ballad, and I think this is here to fill that void. Sure, you can argue Montenegro 2022 was a Balkan ballad as well, sure, but there were still kind of some things missing, and one Balkan ballad over several years is kind of lacking in its own right. So yeah, North Macedonia have decided to rock up to Junior Eurovision with a Balkan ballad, which I think works really, really well. And another thing that makes this really great is that it's in a minor key. Like I mentioned earlier, I tend to prefer songs in the minor key over songs in major key, and the song is in G minor, I think, and that just automatically sounds a little bit better in my head. Plus, if you listen to the kind of instrumental break in the middle, you can hear a lot of really traditional instruments, and I think that really adds to, like I mentioned earlier with Ireland, the whole expectancy factor. It's kind of something that you would expect from this country, and that's kind of why a lot of us love it as such. So yeah, I think this is great. I will say that structurally it's a little bit lacking. I think there could have been maybe a more dramatic transition into the last chorus. However, beyond that, I really love the song. I've listened to it multiple times now, and I only started listening to it yesterday. So yeah, it's a great song, and do I think it can win? Realistically, I think it's an outsider. I have seen two separate YouTubers listed as a potential winner, and not gonna lie, I would love that. Please bring us to Skopje for the next edition. But realistically, obviously North Macedonia doesn't have a huge population. But on the flip side, again, like I mentioned, there's the expectancy factor, and also the jury, as we all know, have more power than the televotes in Junior Eurovision. So maybe if this scores really well in the jury, this can have enough televote points to take the crown. So we have to see what happens, but I really, really enjoy this. And if there's one takeaway from this, I think you should be checking out at least my top 3 songs. Those are my absolute most favorites, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But especially North Macedonia this year, Kazimi Kazimi Koi, very, very good Balkan ballad. I highly recommend checking it out. So with that said, that is my top 16. So if you disagree, let me know in the comments. It's totally fine. We all are entitled to our own opinions on this. Just, be nice to the singers. That's the kind of whole point of this. Oh, and I forgot to mention a few things. First off, the staging director they have announced will be the same one as the one in 2018 and 2019. Now, I didn't watch 2018 or 2019, so I don't know if that's a good thing. However, according to other Eurofans who have watched those editions, that is a good thing and have said that Tamara is in good hands. So now that's a nice thing to have, of course. Often people mention that one of the issues Macedonia tends to have is staging, because obviously they don't have a huge budget, as it were. So we're getting a very competent staging director, so that's nice. Another thing I wanted to mention is that the song was mainly composed by 2 people, that being Robert Bilbilov and also Darko Dimitrov, the latter of which has also written several other songs for generally Balkan countries in Eurovision, including songs like Breathe for Montenegro from 2022, I think, and then earlier on also other Macedonian entries, junior and adult, as well as Loco Loco, which was Serbia 2021, so he's clearly got the range. But yeah, if you're wondering why the song might have some similarities, you might say, with Breathe from Montenegro 2022, then that's why, because they have exactly the same composer. So yeah, that's why the songs sound a little bit similar, and that's why both songs have that kind of Balkan ethnic element, if you will. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Tamara is in good hands, and I think this has all of the ingredients required for, if nothing else, a good result for North Macedonia. Alright, they've had I think 5th place or 6th place or something like that, and if there's any year where they can break that barrier, break that ceiling, then I think this is it. So yeah, I hope at least, if they don't win, I hope that they at least get a good result, kind of much in the same way Ireland did, for example. So with that said, let's move on to our next section, where I talk a little bit about the potential winners, which I've kind of already hinted at. So here are the countries that I think can potentially win the contest later this month. In order, they are the UK, France, Netherlands, Armenia, Spain, and then as outsiders, North Macedonia and Germany. Now, like I mentioned earlier, those last two are pretty much outsiders. However, I think North Macedonia does have a better shout than Germany at winning the whole thing. So, with that said, let's go through every single country very briefly. First off, the UK. We already know they're going to stage it very well, because they're pretty much using the exact same staging team that they're using for adult Eurovision. And of course, there's going to be props. I think they're going to, like I mentioned, ship over those 3 podium-like things over to Nice, for example, and I think that's going to constitute a very important part of the staging, and then maybe kind of near the end they're going to step out and then I don't know, dance just on the stage by itself. So I don't know how exactly it's going to work, but there's going to be props that has been confirmed as much. And I think if they can get the camera cuts to be like really sharp and get the lighting exactly right, I think this has a really realistic chance of winning the contest. I mean, last year we saw how good the staging was in Yerevan, and even though Freya couldn't sing live because she was sick, it still turned out like a really good product. And of course, there is still the concern that this year Junior won't be broadcast on BBC One, but rather BBC Two. So maybe the British televote, like internal televote, could be a little bit smaller than initially hoped for. But we'll have to see what happens. But in general, I think the song is solid. I think the staging will be solid, and so as long as they can sing well live, I think there's not going to be much of a problem in at least getting a top placement and possibly going for the win. After that, we have France, who I'm pretty convinced are trying to go for the double. They're sending an upbeat song in a year where there's a lot of ballads. They're obviously going to have insane staging as they did in Yerevan and as they will do later, because, I mean, look at the music video. They had like 20-something dancers doing an really sophisticated choreography. And so I think there's no doubt that they're at least trying to get a good result on home territory. Will she win? I don't know that for sure. There's some parts, like I mentioned, that are definitely aimed towards an international audience, so I think they're at the very least hoping to do well, if not win the whole contest. So I wouldn't say they're definitely winning, but I think there is a decent chance that France could do the double. With that said, let's move on to the Netherlands. Like I mentioned, this is an upbeat song in a sea of ballads this year, and that alone will make it stand out. And beyond that, the Netherlands can do staging. Sometimes they miss. I think La Festa, I think, was a little bit of a miss because they could have done with much sharper camera angles. But if they can do that for this year, with more sharp angles on the dancers, for example, during the drop, I think this can do well and possibly win the contest as well. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what exactly happens. However, I think a top 10 result is pretty much guaranteed at this point. With Armenia, it's a K-pop song, and all of the kids are loving K-pop these days. So I think that alone gives it a little bit of an advantage, and definitely it's going to be memorable. The kids are, dressed up in costumes and outfits that are very much not typical of girls of their age, and they're singing in a way that is corresponding to global pop music interests. So in that sense, I think this has a good shot of winning. Plus, of course, we know that Armenia's staging is pretty good as well. I wouldn't say it's amazing. Honestly, I would kind of say that France kind of takes that. But I would say Armenia's staging is also alright, and if they can stage this well with, once again, rapid fire camera cuts, I think this can do very well and possibly be another win for Armenia. They're basically France and Armenia just juggling the win between each other. So yeah, that's possible as well. Although at this point I'm not 100% certain. We'll have to see how the staging really works out in practice and on camera. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to Spain. As we know, the jury really like these jazzy, bluesy songs, as evidenced by, France last year and debatably, I would argue, Georgia 2021. Those types of songs are really popular with the jury for some reason, and I think this song definitely has elements of that. And so I think Spain are naturally already a little bit advantaged in the jury department. Of course, what's also important in winning is the televote, and there's plenty of people in Spain, and I think it's going to be broadcast on a major channel on RTVE. So we have to see what happens there. And the song is kind of catchy. I don't think there's gonna be like a particular hook that will stick in people's heads. They will probably remember the melody definitely, but I don't think there's necessarily a hook, but it is still nonetheless a catchy song. And like I mentioned with all these other songs, it's upbeat, so kind of by default it stands out. So I think Spain can win as well, but we all thought Spain 2020 2 or 21 or what is it could win as well, and well, that didn't quite happen. So we'll have to see how things turn out. We'll have to see how the staging goes, especially whether they decide to go with a train on stage or some other kind of over the top prop, but we'll have to see what happens. After that is North Macedonia. This is arguably not arguably, this is the only ballad on my potential winner list, and that's because as a ballad, it stands out among the other ballads. First off, Tamara's voice is very, very mature. If you didn't see the video, and hell, even if you did see the video, you might even think it's like some 20-something-year-old singing the song, and it's very mature sounding, which could harm it a little bit, I think, in certainly a televote. But I think as a ballad, it stands out from all of the other ballads, and that alone, I think, can give it a little bit of an advantage. Like I mentioned, expectancy. There's no other Balkan ballads in this edition, and so for that alone, I think this stands out, and this, Tamara is a very experienced singer, and so I think there's not going to be much of an issue for her to really hit those key notes in the song. So she's a very good vocalist, and the staging is definitely a concern. North Macedonia doesn't necessarily have the largest budgets, let's just say, but it is still possible, and I think sometimes simpler can be better. And certainly with a ballad, I think it's much easier to stage it simply than, say, an upbeat song. So we'll have to see what happens. I would not rule it out at this point. I think it's a very good song, and if it's staged simply but effectively, I think this still has a chance of going for the trophy. And finally, this is the real outsider. That's Germany. I think on balance, it's a little bit too basic in terms of the beats to really go for the trophy. However, I think even just the usage of sign language that will definitely make it stand out, and people will notice the song's message even if they don't speak German, and that's, I think, really important, and definitely the dance break is going to make it a little bit more interesting. Of course, that's not the only dance we're having this year, but I think this is definitely Germany's most competent entry, and if anything else, I would just hope for this to have a good result, maybe top 10, possibly pushing top 5, and it will be amazing if this won, but we'll have to see what happens. But for now, I will say this is, again, Germany's most competent entry in my opinion. So with that said, that is my video. That is my top 16, my personal top 16 of Junior Eurovision 2023, and my opinion on who I think could win the contest later this month in Nice. So this is pretty much going to be my last Junior Eurovision video, except I will do one more what we know so far, maybe like a week away from the contest, just to get us up to speed with an interval acts and opening ceremony and stuff like that. But beyond that, I'm probably not going to make any more junior videos, except maybe afterwards when I kind of reflect on the results and such. So yeah, between now and then, which is only about 20 something days away, yeah, that's going to be it. I will be making a what we know so far video, like I mentioned earlier. But this is pretty much all of my opinions on Junior Eurovision 2023. They might still change, but I'll just update them on Twitter, so you can follow me there at BlueRigel4, and you can also follow my blog, which I'll have in the description, where I'll also have the latest information on what we know so far about Junior Eurovision 2023, as well as further ahead Eurovision 2024 in Malmö. So with that said, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like on the video if you did, and subscribe so you don't miss my upcoming content on Junior Eurovision 2023 as well as Eurovision 2024. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.